have no idea. People just think everybody gets the minimum wage, right?
Our integrity is compromised every single day.
I love what I do, but I don't like the way I get paid.
I've had to hold down 3 jobs at once because my tips were so bad.
I feel like I'm working for nothing.
Doing this work has helped me see that we can make a difference, that we can make change. Not just make change, we can force change.
This blew my mind. The minimum wage for tipped workers is $2.13 an hour. And in some states, it's better than that. But some states, that's the national.
Lots of states. Yeah.
That's like Chinese iPod factory level wages. $2.13.
Well, actually, when you earn $2.13, you actually don't get anything at all because your wage goes entirely to taxes. So you literally get a paycheck that says, this is not a paycheck.
It was disheartening, soul-crushing to open up a paycheck and see zero.
If I didn't make tips all week and then I get a check that says void, this is not a check, you're not making anything. You can't make rent. You can't make your ends meet.
The reason that you've got the largest and one of the most profitable and fastest growing industries in America paying the absolute lowest paying wages in this country is because the power and influence of a trade lobby called the National Restaurant Association. Good morning, everybody. We fired up, ready to go? All right.
The National Restaurant Association is the most organized and powerful employer lobby in Congress. We call it the other NRA.
The NRA's most active members are chain restaurants like Denny's, Olive Garden, Applebee's, and IHOP. They have enormous influence, and they're trying to protect the restaurant industry. They do not want to pay higher wages.
In the United States, we have a two-tiered wage system. There is a federal minimum wage, currently $7.25. But tipped workers are allowed to be paid a sub-minimum wage of $2.13 an hour, as long as tips bring them to the full minimum wage.
The forces of the status quo are very powerful. They're institutionalized. We have the National Restaurant Association. We even have people here in the Congress who don't believe there should be any minimum wage.
It is no surprise that the $2.13 an hour has been stuck there since 1991. There was a deal brokered between Congress and the NRA to say, okay, we'll let you increase the regular minimum wage, but we want the sub-minimum wage frozen permanently at $2.13 an hour.
When you reveal to people that tipped workers make as little as $2.13 an hour, most people are shocked by that. And to think that you could be making $2 and have to rely on $5 an hour worth of tips to make just $7 is a scary thing. So this is as just and important a struggle as there is right now.
I don't think most consumers know that their tips are actually not gratuity in many situations, that it's actually a subsidy towards the employer that goes to the worker's wage bill. And they're pretty shocked about it, actually.
This is a gender equity issue. This is a race equity issue. This is actually a legacy of slavery.
People really did not want to pay newly freed black folks a wage. They wanted to keep people in a subservient position where they had to bow and grin and scrape in order to get some money to survive.
Restaurant owners were allowed to pay $0 an hour and let tip workers live on tips, which meant that the very first wage for tipped workers was $0. And we've gone up over 100 years to the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers, which is $2.13 an hour. There are 17 states that are at the absolute bottom of the barrel with a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers at $2.13 an hour. Another 26 states set their tipped wage rates above $2.13 an hour, but below their regular state minimum wage. But 7 states, California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Minnesota, and Alaska, require the restaurant industry to pay the full minimum wage, plus tips.
If you work in a state where there is a tip minimum wage, the employer has to make up the difference between that base pay of $2.13 and whatever you didn't make to get you up to minimum wage. So if you're a worker and you've worked a shift and you didn't have very many customers and all of a sudden at the end of the night you didn't actually make that money, your employer needs to make up the difference.
But most people don't be knowing their rights. They don't know the laws. They don't know how it works. Meaning if you don't work and make up, a certain amount of money in a 40-hour week, the company's supposed to give you that other portion of money. That's like non-existent. It doesn't exist. People don't know to argue about it.
Wage and tip theft is so rampant in the restaurant industry that the U.S. Department of Labor says that we have the highest rates of violation of wage and tip laws of any industry in the United States.
If you haven't made any money, they're supposed to match that so that you at least have minimum wage for the week. Most of the time, that doesn't happen. And I've certainly never met an employer that has said, hey, remind me if I owe you any money.
It's a struggle to just get by. I have 3 kids. I have to have 2 part-time jobs because I'm a mom, but it still is not enough. I have to get food stamps from the state. I still get Medicaid from the state also for my babies. It's a struggle to be able to do things for my kids because of the way I get paid now, the tips. $3 an hour is definitely not enough. $4 an hour is not enough.
70% of tip workers are women. They're women who work at IHOP, Applebee's, and diners all across America. And they suffer from 2 times the poverty rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce. Nearly half of tipped workers rely on public subsidies to make ends meet.
We are subsidizing multi-million-dollar corporations in 2 ways. We pay almost entirely for these workers' wages through our tips. But we're also paying for taxpayer-funded public assistance in the form of food stamps, Medicaid, emergency room use, all the different ways that workers have to find a way to survive and can't on the wages that they earn.
I always have, worked either another job or, you have to do something else to make ends meet. Really, at this point, what you can afford to do is pay bills and no extra. These are the type of things you just kind of get used to and don't complain about them because it becomes everyday life. But that's not the American dream. It's not the American way.
Absolutely, every restaurant that I worked in, I have stories of managers trying to take advantage of me, of, drunk guys try to take me and dance with me and grab me. And when you're out there on the floor, you don't necessarily feel safe.
I remember working in restaurants and you would have someone say something extremely inappropriate to you, or you'd have someone touch you. And the thing is it would be the 28th of the month, the 29th of the month. And the 1st of the next month was rolling right around and you had a rent check to pay. And so you are more likely to stand up for yourself and to reject sexual harassment on the 15th of the month, or maybe the 10th of the month, when you could pick up an extra shift to make up for telling that guy to go buzz off. But on the 28th of the month or the 29th of the month, you will let that person touch you because of your economic desperation.
It's not just about, oh, I need to accept this because I'm going to get a tip. It's about the actual instability of the environment that you have. What happens if I complain about this? Will my shifts be changed? There's a lot of fear around retribution just for standing up for yourself.
I was working at a sports bar, and it was during March Madness. We were really busy. I was in the middle of taking an order, like at the table, pen in hand, writing it down, talking to my customers. And I was kind of bent over, you know, because I was leaning over talking to the customers. And this guy came up behind me and just full on grabbed me. I mean, full on. And I didn't know what to do. I was flabbergasted. I mean, what do you do? I went and told my manager, and they said, oh, well, boys will be boys. We need their money. It's March Madness. You know, he's going to keep paying money for beer all night. So he got a full-on grope, and I had to just deal with it.
About half of all Americans work in a restaurant at some point in their lives. And especially when young women work in restaurants, they learn to accept harassment as a normal thing. And then you get out of that restaurant, you've already started to condition yourself to accept undignified behavior. And so it has long-term effects.
It's not like there are poverty wages for tipped workers and there's sexual harassment. No, this is actually the same issue. Because when you force a woman to earn her tips as the majority of her income, she is way more vulnerable to harassment.
Lily and I are here in Michigan to join with Saru to try to raise the profile of this effort to get one fair wage on the ballot.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Lily Tomlin. Oh, I'm sorry. Lily.
Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin. We're both actors. We're right now in a series called Grace and Frankie, and we were in 9 to 5. But much more important, listen,
we're here.
Much more important is that we're here with Restaurant Opportunities United because we want to get a one fair wage on the ballot next November. It would raise the wages not just for everybody, but for tipped workers.
Have you ever worked as a waiter?
I'm a tipped worker.
You're a tipped worker. I didn't realize that there was a two-tiered system. When we talk about raising the minimum wage, most of the time it doesn't include tipped workers, and I was ignorant of that.
We're trying to get it on the ballot in 2018. Yeah. They'd have a minimum wage across the board, and they'd get their tips as well.
That's awesome. I mean, once you pay a worker $3.38 an hour, nobody is going to be respectful of them or treat them as a professional. And most servers really do think of themselves as a professional. Even I, as a young girl, I wanted to have great service and a good turnover and satisfaction. And I went into work every day with that in mind.
There's been this question about, well, why would celebrities come here and talk about one fair wage? You know, why are you sticking your neck out? It's a human issue. If you don't know a problem exists, you're ignorant, and that's not good, but it's ignorance. If you know a problem exists and you don't do anything about it, then you're part of the problem.
The fight for 15 started with fast food workers who are not tipped, and neither are cooks, dishwashers, and other back-of-the-house employees. So the fight for 15 affects millions of people.
Unfortunately, not every city or state that's past $15 has included tipped workers. So we need both 15 and one fair wage.
$15 an hour minimum wage as a starting wage in the restaurant industry is just really not realistic in today's economy.
There either will be fewer jobs because restaurants have this huge increase in their payroll, or that the tip workers will be getting less.
For most restaurant operators, it would significantly increase cost, drive prices up, and likely create less jobs.
Actually, in the places that have raised the minimum wage, none of the nightmare scenarios happened. One of the excuses, of course, is that employers are not going to be able to afford to pay these increased wages, and they're going to have to lay people off. That just simply hasn't happened.
In California, they made all tipped wages equal to regular hourly wages, and we find that business is booming, that wages are up, that people tip on top, that none of these fears really play out.
States that pay full minimum wage to tip workers actually saw stronger growth than in states that pay less.
These 7 states are faring better on every measure. Higher restaurant sales per capita, higher job growth in the restaurant industry, far less sexual harassment, even better rates of tipping.
The next time you go into a restaurant, take a look around. Often the people waiting tables and making tips are white, while most people working in the kitchen for relatively less money are black or brown.
I've had some gigs, dishwashing gigs, and the people who usually work at back of house were people of my skin color. I've been trying to move up, but restaurant owners, from my experiences, always want to keep me, stagnant to just a dishwasher. And I explained to them I do want to move out, I do want to become a server, and they're like, well, that's what we're looking for right now.
In the restaurant industry, what you're going to witness is a big difference between the way they treat what's called front and back of house. The difference between servers and cooks, line people, and hostess. Depending on race, gender, all these people will be treated different, and which job you're going to have in this industry.
I started in the restaurant industry 12 years ago as a server, was a host for a while, and eventually I understood that the amount of money that I was going to make would be dependent on how my guests perceived me, not the level of service. I knew that the level of service that I knew how to provide was exemplary. But when you start incorporating being a woman, being black, all of a sudden, people's implicit biases are dictating how I'm being related to and how I'm making my money.
The data shows that customers tip workers of color less. In fact, we released a report showing that Black women tipped workers in New York and Massachusetts earn almost $8 an hour less than white men. And it's due to 2 factors. One, the fact that Black women are segregated into lower-paying restaurants, but it's also due to the fact that when they get into fine dining, if they get into fine dining, and they're standing right by white men, they get tipped less.
6 months ago, we stood here in this room together to announce the introduction of the Raise the Wage Act. And I'm proud to say that later today, the House will pass that bill.
On this vote, the yeas are 231 and the nays are 199. This bill is passed.
We came together in a historic vote to pass one fair wage, to raise the wage to $15 per hour, equally applied to everyone, including tip workers. And now we have to finish the job in the United States Senate. We're gonna go out, we're gonna get this done, one fair wage for every single person in the United States of America.
I, of course, am already thinking about where we need to go in the future, right? So once we get this, now we need to start pushing for even more protections for all workers in this country.
We are directing that all bars, nightclubs, wineries be closed in the state of California.
All bars in the state and all restaurants will close at 9 o'clock.
Any bar or restaurant closes at 8 o'clock tonight.
Widespread restaurant closures and massive layoffs have shocked the industry.
At least 1 million people lost their job yesterday in the hospitality industry.
Once crowded and full of life, bars and restaurants are now struggling to survive. One recent report predicts up to 230,000 restaurants could permanently close by the end of the year.
6 million of the 23 million people who lost their job early in the pandemic
worked in the food and beverage industry.
Servers, bartenders, kitchen staff, and more have been left in the lurch, many without paid sick leave, paid time off, or benefits.
We've been devastated, and I say devastated not just for front of the house, back of the house, immigrants that were working without any kind of legal status.
The pandemic really revealed what I call the pre-existing condition in the restaurant industry, the dysfunction of the sub-minimum wage, the untenability of the whole system for both workers and employers.
Millions of full-time workers who have been laid off are finding out they made too little to qualify for unemployment benefits. People who work in restaurants, bars, and salons make their living off tips, and many of these tipped workers earn wages that don't qualify for unemployment.
I know myself and other servers really struggled with collecting unemployment benefits. Because of that sub-minimum wage, a lot of times servers are not able to qualify for unemployment benefits.
When they are using food banks, using emergency medical care, spreading the pandemic because they have no care, no choice, no home, no food, that affects all of us. If we learn nothing else from the pandemic, it is that we are interdependent.
For the first time since March, New York City restaurants will open for indoor dining.
Indoor dining returns, but how safe is it really?
So workers are being called back to work for sub-minimum wage to expose themselves and their family to the virus in essentially a super spreader location when tips are down.
With restaurants at 50% capacity, restaurant employees tell us tips are down just as much.
People are recognizing if, in fact, people have been relying upon their salary on tips and they're not getting them, well, then how are they getting paid?
Protesters made their way here to Philadelphia City Hall to bring awareness to the disparity they say restaurant workers are facing.
The person who brings your food is worth more than $2.83.
For essential restaurant workers, it's putting your life at risk to go to your jobs every day.
A risk they feel comes with very little reward.
Restaurant workers are being healthcare administrators by taking your temperature. They are being healthcare marshals by making sure that you have your mask on and then expecting that your customer is going to be able to give you a fair tip. That's a hard ask.
We just surveyed 2,000 workers, and the overwhelming numbers of comments from women said sexual harassment got worse with the pandemic. It's a public health disaster because the workers are saying customers are belligerent, they don't listen, they're not going to put on their masks, and if I push them, they yell at me, they're not giving me a tip, and I desperately need those tips.
Here in Illinois, tipped workers are more than twice as likely to live in poverty as other workers.
We are here today to say we are ending the legacy of slave wages. We are ending the legacy of sub-minimum wage here in our great state of Illinois.
We are coming together today to put an end to the sub-minimum wage, and we will keep coming back until nobody in this country works for $2.13 an hour.
Thousands of workers saying, I'm not going to go back to work without one fair wage. We saw in many towns the majority of employers finding that they just had to pay a full minimum wage to get any employees to come back.
The chef and owner, Russell Jackson, pays his staff more than the minimum wage, and all tips are shared. It's exactly what the advocacy group One Fair Wage is pushing for.
COVID is tearing us down to the stud right now. You kind of look at it as a two-edged sword. It's a systemic problem that has always existed. Now, because it's being torn down, we get to rebuild it in a way that's really efficient and proper. And the One Fair Wage Act is really one of those key cornerstones that's going to help us to continue to build in a better way.
So many of the owners that I've been working with recognize that paying a full federal minimum wage plus tips and allowing for tip sharing is beneficial for them as well, because it has them to be able to keep workers that feel supported and stable in their place of work. That allows for the owners to have less hirings and firings because you have a committed staff.
there is widespread support from some major restaurateurs like Danny Meyer, David Chang, and Tom Colicchio, who have restaurants not only here in New York City, but across the country and in some cases all over the world.
It's only worth getting back up on our feet as an industry, which this city desperately needs, if we do it the right way.
So the pandemic really showed that we cannot go back to the way things were. We can only go forward to a future in which workers are treated as the skilled professionals that they are. They're paid a livable wage from their employer, and they're not having to rely on the whims and biases of customers.
When you confront wage injustice, it allows you to confront all the other injustices that happen in restaurants and throughout our society. Sexism, homophobia, ageism, because that's going to create the equity that so many people are looking for. And it's going to be a more sustainable model as we go towards the future.
Knowing that I can inspire others has given me so much hope to take all those experiences that I went through and try to find a way to make sure that it does not happen to anyone else. And that's my main mission.
As soon as the consumers start demanding that the cooks and the people who serve me my food are treated well, that's going to have a huge impact on this industry.
So now there's a model for employers. Now there's a pathway for consumers. It will just take everybody who eats out to stand by these workers and the people who employ them who actually believe in one fair wage.